Brand new reporting from the Wall Street Journal that Paul Manafort was working actively to seek a plea deal with Bob Mueller to basically stave off the upcoming trial in D.C. Now, the reporting, which is important, is that those talks broke down, plea discussions that were going on. Imagine this, how dramatic this was. These discussions going on while everyone was awaiting what that Virginia jury would do, deliberating on the tax and bank fraud charges against Manafort. The talks stalling, quote, over issues raised by special counsel Robert Mueller. The Journal not yet able to confirm what those issues are. Now, this is remarkable reporting. If you follow these stories, if you think about the images last week that captivated the nation, all of this shows something we didn't know until tonight, that something was getting to Manafort. Maybe it's the potential jail time that he sees now is all too real in his own trial. Or maybe it is this mounting pressure across the entire Trump universe, with Michael Cohen implicating Trump in a crime, with the Feds granting immunity to Trump's money man and his tabloid ally, plus these aggressive moves from New York State prosecutors as they eye the Trump organization itself. In fact, it is that federal probe in New York that is seriously worrying some Trump allies.
Perhaps the special counsel is the least of the threats the president faces right now.
Right.
You've got the Southern District, you've got the New York Attorney General, you've got the Manhattan District Attorney. Where's the greatest threat?
Well, I've said that right from the beginning, because I think he has constitutional defenses to the investigation being conducted by Mueller. But there are no constitutional defenses to what the Southern District is investigating. So I think the Southern District is the greatest threat.
You hear the quote there, the greatest threat to Donald Trump, according to Alan Dershowitz, would be from this office that got the guilty plea out of Michael Cohen, that is actively granting immunity to one of the highest-ranking employees who knows all the financial secrets of the Trump organization. Of course, there are other threats, because while the initial investigation into Trump was focused on the question of collusion, the list is growing. It includes these campaign-related crimes. It includes alleged corruption in the Trump campaign and the potential administration, those deals that Manafort and others were working on. It includes the legal exposure of the Trump organization tonight. Obviously, it also includes these payoffs to women who allege past relationships. And then, of course, as we go through the legal woes that are raising the heat on the Trump administration, there is that mounting evidence of obstruction by Donald Trump and or his aides that Mueller is investigating. That is the backdrop for what we have learned now for the first time. If you follow the news, if you follow these cases, you know that Paul Manafort is the one who wouldn't plea. He's the one who wouldn't negotiate. He's the one who went all the way to trial, as all these other people, including Michael Cohen last week, pled out. So it is big and new tonight that Michael Cohen, George Papadopoulos, Michael Flynn, all these other people could be potentially joined, according to this reporting, by Paul Manafort, which does suggest that he does not think a pardon is on the way. But there's one more thing I need to tell you. Vanity Fair also has a new report tonight that Trump at least took active steps to explore the idea of a Manafort pardon, that he clashed with White House counsel Don McGahn over it. McGahn reportedly against the idea, and sources say Trump responded by threatening to get rid of McGahn and hire a new lawyer who would go along with a Manafort pardon. Now, this is all tough news for the Trump White House, because it again suggests that Trump is his own worst enemy in this probe. The pardon power, legal experts tell us, can be abused in illegal ways. It also suggests that while Trump was publicly defending McGahn, including on Twitter, privately he's still considering other strategies and bracing for a wartime footing, where he would want a lawyer who's more aggressive towards Mueller than McGahn. Of course, we all know McGahn is someone who is benefited by leaks that portray him as very helpful to Bob Mueller, not an adversary. And then you have Paul Manafort considering a deal with Mueller, which suggests that rumors of whatever potential pardon there weren't good enough for Paul Manafort and his lawyers last week, as he considers the up to 80 years in jail with 2 trials to go. So we're about to hear directly from this journalist breaking the Manafort story right now. I also want to tell you I'm joined by a very special panel tonight. Maya Wiley, a former counsel of the mayor of New York City. I have a programming announcement about her in a moment. Elie Honig, a former federal prosecutor who worked in the same office that was prosecuting Cohen and secured this plea deal. Mara Gay, a member of the New York Times editorial board, and Shelby Holliday, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, who broke this story, which is why we add another Wall Street Journal reporter, Aruna Vishwanathan, breaking this story and joining us by phone. Thank you for hopping on the line after this big scoop that I think everyone will be talking about tonight. What do you see as the import, the significance of what you've unearthed that Paul Manafort's lawyers were exploring discussions with Mueller to negotiate a deal on the D.C. charges?
Thanks for having me. So, it does look like there is a little bit of a chink in the armor, so to speak. I don't want to read too much into this. It is relatively common as sort of you get down to the wire. If they already went through a very grueling trial, they have potentially another very grueling trial coming up in another couple of weeks. You want to sort of sit down and explore what are the possible options for trying to get this off the table, and is there some kind of a deal we can reach where we can kind of handle all this together, get him in front of the judge in Virginia to get sentenced and get it all over with together. Now, as you mentioned and we said in the story, they didn't seem to reach a deal. They are moving forward to go ahead with this Washington trial. There is the potential prospect for a third trial. We'll find out later this week if prosecutors are going to try to retry those deadlock counts. So I don't want to read too much into this, but it does suggest that there is some softening of his position and maybe the potential for some kind of deal.
Well, Aruna, I appreciate you don't want to read too much into it. You sound less excited about your story than a lot of other people because you have dropped something of a bombshell, although we appreciate your measured and humble telephone style. This is a bombshell because, as you know, up until this report, for months, Paul Manafort has been the lone stone-cold resistor and has said nothing and intimated nothing. I mean, Michael Cohen was out telling every reporter on and off the record that he could get. He's ready to cop a deal. Manafort, the opposite. Can you tell us from your reporting whether the D.C. negotiations would have necessarily included jail time, and was there some sweetener in there for Manafort as you understand it?
We don't know the terms that were on the table at this point. Always when you're going to reach a deal, to some extent, they're going to drop some of the charges that you face. So he would never have likely had to have pled to everything that was on the table. But we don't know at this point what was specifically on the table.
Aruna, stay with me. I want to bring in our panel. And Maya Wiley, first, your reaction to this report, and second, anything else you want to know with Aruna on the line with us about what she found.
Well, first, I think for all the reasons you've already said, Ari, one, it's amazing how you lose friends when those friends are facing prison time. Not surprising that Manafort was softening. I think we don't yet know whether or not there's going to be continuing discussions. We shouldn't assume that just because they broke down at this point, they aren't going to continue. For one thing I'd want to know is, do we have any sense of whether there are continuing conversations? Because just because prosecutors are getting ready to continue with a trial that's been booked doesn't mean there aren't continuing negotiations going on. The other thing, though, that we don't know is maybe Manafort didn't offer enough. That's actually a possibility. I would actually be very surprised if he weren't necessarily looking to what Donald Trump might be willing to do at the same time that he was trying to hedge his bets with what he might be able to negotiate with prosecutors.
To that point, Ellie, when you hear this, and Aruna used the language of, oh, maybe the lawyers could wrap it all up at once, that would seem to suggest they didn't think they were getting a mistrial on all charges, that his lawyers got him to a place of saying, well, you're already about to get some jail time here. Do you want to bundle D.C. with it?
Yep. Plea deals happen when both sides have something to gain and something to lose. And so in that respect, I think a plea could make a lot of sense for both sides. Manafort would limit his exposure. Mueller would lock in some more counts of conviction, and both sides would save the resources and money of another trial. But I'm more enthusiastic as well about Aruna's reporting. The question I have is, were the talks for a straight plea or were the talks for a cooperation plea? Because if there was some talk of cooperation being part of a plea, that's a much bigger deal.
Aruna, go ahead.
Yeah, we don't know those terms right now. All we know is that they did have some talks to discuss, and that is the biggest question. Would it just be sort of plead out to some counts and get sentenced and leave it at that, or open the door to more cooperation? And we don't have that reporting just yet.
Let me bring in your colleague, Shelby Holliday, who also follows this probe, and take a listen to Roger Stone, who you've reported on extensively, with his own version of leaks and what he thinks is coming down the pike.
I predicted yesterday, based on excellent sourcing, that the special counsel is going to charge Donald Trump Jr. with lying to the FBI.
Donald Trump Jr., you just mentioned him. Is Mueller going after him next? You said they're going to try and get him for lying to the FBI.
I believe so. And notice they're not going after him for the underlying crime, because there is no crime. He's done nothing wrong.
How does that figure into the president's state of mind tonight with this much heat? And then you got to think in the White House, Donald Trump, who's been talking about the pardon, leaking about Paul Manafort's a good guy, hearing what Aruna's reported, that there is talks underway.
Yeah, I think this is probably shaking the White House more than we know. There are various reports that the president is worried about not just his son, but also his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, where this Mueller investigation could be going for them. I also think Roger Stone's point is interesting. He is a well-sourced person. He's very connected. I also think he's trying to deflect a lot of his own legal problems and maybe share them and spread them onto other people. We know that Donald Trump Jr. and Roger Stone have some things in common. They both, for example, communicated with these Twitter accounts connected to the hacked and leaked emails. We know that they had communications that Bob Mueller is looking at. And so as Roger Stone is saying this, it's interesting. You know, it sort of mirrors some of the legal issues he's having. I do think one thing that's really interesting from Aruna's reporting, we followed the Paul Manafort first trial very carefully, and some of the exhibits that were uploaded by the special counsel didn't get a ton of focus in court itself. But the exhibits were interesting because they connect Paul Manafort even more closely to Konstantin Kilimnik, someone who is also indicted and part of the second trial. And we saw a lot of evidence back and forth all the way up to 2015, 2016, even 2017 bank accounts connecting those two. And
to put it in a single word, you're talking about Russia, and that the D.C. trial was going to deal more with Russia than tax evasion. Mara?
Yeah, pulling back here, what's really interesting to me is that it seems that the legal process seems to be playing out, as it should. And whereas the political process is not actually happening in any kind of a normal way. And I'm at this point becoming far more concerned with what's going on or what isn't happening in Congress, especially among Republicans, than the legal system. Some branches of our government are working and some are not. I mean, Republicans in Congress keep moving that red line. In terms of when they are willing to discuss impeachment, when they're willing to, admit that maybe the president has gone too far. And I just fear that given where the Republican base is and given the instinct for self-preservation above country, that this may take us in a very scary place. I mean, there's a world in which the legal process may play out. We may find, enormously historic and tragic evidence of wrongdoing from the White House, which we're already starting to see, although not with the president himself. And yet Congress may do nothing.
Well, and Ellie, this is the mind state of the president, again, from this new Gabe Sherman report tonight. Bill Shine, the former Fox executive, is now inside the White House, says that the emotional state of the president, quote, very tender. Like a soft beef or a very high-quality cut of meat. A former White House official, that's a real source, saying, quote, Trump spent the weekend calling people and screaming. Sources saying he, quote, feels cornered with no clear way out. How do you put that in the context, that emotional state, which we have an unusual president who has difficulties dealing with his own emotions, and often that leads him to make mistakes that are against his own interests? How do you couple that with what he's going to think when he sees this reporting that's broken just here this hour that Paul Manafort is considering a deal?
I think we'd all like a commander-in-chief who was a little cooler under pressure and who could hold his poker face a little better. But think about all the different legal troubles that are swirling around the president now. We have Mueller. Actually, we have Manafort. We have Cohen. We have Weisselberg. We have Pecker. We have the state AG here in New York. We have the DA here in Manhattan. And so there is a storm around this president, unlike what I think any president has ever seen. It's of his own making, but we'll see how he holds up. He needs to get and listen to some really solid legal advice.
And the other question, Aruna, as always, when we get these tantalizing reports, is the question from so many movies about crime and the mafia, cui bono, who benefits? And obviously, as the good reporter you are, you're not going to get into any hints about your sources, but the Mueller team is famously tight-lipped. This leak is coming out now. I wonder, within the bounds of what you're able to share, what you can tell us about why something like this might be coming out, or what, if anything, you can say about the tantalizing sentence in your article where you say these talks basically stalled over issues raised by Mueller, one of the people said, one of your sources told you, but you couldn't determine what the issues were.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't really sort of get into that too much. At this point, we don't know what the issues were that they broke down over. We just know that they did hold these talks. He's at least considering trying to reach a deal, and that's sort of the extent of what we know right now.
Understood. Aruna Vishwanathan, I want to thank you for bringing your breaking story to The Beat, a big story there in the Wall Street Journal. I imagine your phone will continue to ring. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.